All right, hello there. We are going to do a training for paper grading. The purpose of this training is to make sure all of our unloaders are grading materials the same across all of our operations. We have seen inconsistency even within our own plant on how a particular material is graded depending on the person grading it. The information in this guide is what we will use to grade materials we receive from our suppliers. As we go through the training, keep in mind that as the person grading it, you essentially have a checkbook from Midwest Fiber. What you grade a material in as is how it will be recorded in the office, and that is how the suppliers are paid. Materials received by our plants must be graded based on the specifications within this guide, not based on how it is processed or shipped. Paper is split into two categories, free sheet and groundwood. From there, it is further categorized between uncoated and coated. In general, as you go down the hierarchy, the values go down. The same could generally be said for the value from left to right on this chart. Knowing this helps us so that we can accurately upgrade or downgrade a supplier's material to the appropriate grade when warranted. This is not to be used to ever downgrade a material if it isn't truly warranted and therefore cheating our suppliers out of money truly owed to them. In the following slides, we will go through each of these grades, their specific descriptions, pictures of these materials, and what contamination is allowable. We will begin with uncoated free sheet and move from left to right across this hierarchy through to coated groundwood grades. Beginning with the free sheet uncoated grades, the highest value grade we receive is hard white. If you are grading something as hard white, it is imperative that you are correct in this grading. Hard white is simply a plain white paper. No coatings, colors, dyes, glues, tape, or groundwood can be present. To test for groundwood, make sure you have access to a groundwood pen. Make a small mark on the paper, and if it turns an orange color, it has groundwood present and must be graded as white news blank. Sometimes hard white is in the form of large sheets on a butt roll, trimmings and strips, or even copy paper that was never printed on. Next, we have white ledgers. We have traditionally used two terms to refer to white ledgers, SWL, which is sorted white ledger, and MWL, which is manifold white ledger. The only difference between the two is MWL is pre-consumer, meaning it never made it out of the hands of the manufacturer, and SWL is post-consumer, meaning the consumer received it and then recycled it. White ledgers are still an uncoated paper without any groundwood. However, unlike hard white, they can have ink present with some color as shown here. If you tear the paper and the fibers are white, then it is still white ledger. Office papers and school papers with printing, notes, and possibly highlighting on them are all considered SWL. Instruction manuals, large sheet from a printer that didn't make it to cut, and other white paper with ink but no additional writing on them are considered MWL. For those of you who have been around for a while, you may remember manifold colored ledger. We typically aren't receiving a lot of this these days, but when we do, it goes in with the PMIX or OP and is graded as such for most suppliers. Few, if any, suppliers will have a grade called MCL on the breakdown sheet. Next up in the free sheet uncoated column is OP, or office paper. This group has proven to be one of the most confusing grades alongside the following category of mixed paper. OP is uncoated papers, limited groundwood, usually have printing present, and does not have any unbleachable paper grades like OCC or construction paper. This grade is mostly white, but will have colored papers present. Things you are likely to find in OP are generally anything that can come from an office setting like manila envelopes, file folders, paper shred, printer and copier papers, Post-it notes, and legal pad paper. Generally, this grade can accept limited groundwood containing papers. Groundwood-containing papers you may see come from an office would be newspapers, magazines, OCC, and chipboard. Next, we have mixed paper. Mixed paper is basically a catch-all, bottom-of-the-barrel category. Mixed paper can have any and all of the papers in the other grades of the hierarchy. If the Gaylord of material comes in and it is easy to separate a few items out and make the grade a higher one, it is beneficial to do so. But most times, we will still grade it as mixed paper on the breakdown sheet. The next category of free sheet paper is the coated papers category. In this category, all of the papers will have a slight shine to the paper, which is actually a type of clay coating. Note that this coating can make the groundwood pen work more slowly, as it has to get through the coating before it can detect if it is groundwood or not. To make this easier, tear the paper and use the groundwood pen on the torn fibers. That should show a result much faster. Soft white paper is basically just hard white paper with a coating. It is unprinted and groundwood free. This can contain some uncoated paper, but we want to try to keep that to a minimum since soft white is worth less than hard white. We will usually see soft white paper coming in from printers. PMix, or printer's mix, is the next grade down in the coated free sheets. Some people also refer to PMix as coated book stock. PMix is made up predominantly of coated paper with inks and coloring. This grade may also contain ledger papers, both white and colored. PMix can be large sheets from printers that never made it to cut, standard sheet, trim, and books without bindings as long as there is no groundwood. This grade is typically a pre-consumer grade. Also to note in PMix, you may find UV printed and poly-coated paper. UV print is a very high gloss printing and coating on the paper, but when torn, it tears normally like paper should. High amounts of UV can cause problems if we process it incorrectly. Please let your supervisor know if you unload 2,000 pounds or more of this material off of any supplier's trailer. Poly-coated is a high gloss appearance as well, but when you tear it, you notice there is actually a thin layer of plastic coating on the paper. We can have a little of the poly-coated paper in our PMix, but if we get a lot in, we may have to keep it separate. For supplier purposes, grade this as polycoat on the breakdown sheet. More on polycoat later in the training. Starting into the groundwood, we begin with the uncoated papers. First, white news blank. WNB is the highest value in this category. It is an uncoated groundwood paper, meaning it is not shiny, and if you use a groundwood pen on it, the color will turn orange. This paper is basically a newspaper that hasn't been printed on yet. You will notice a more dingy or grayish appearance of this paper, as well as it being thinner as compared with the free sheet grades. No contamination is allowed in WNB. Next is number 9 news, also known as overissue news. It is known as overissue because this grade is something that comes straight from the printer and never made it to consumer. Hence, it was overissued. These will often even still be folded and will only contain the ads that the print press puts in the paper, not the additional ones stuffed in at distribution buildings. This is a very clean grade of newsprint. Number 8 news, on the other hand, is post-consumer newspaper. This will contain more ads, other kinds of stuffers or inserts printed on white ledger and chipboard. It can have up to 10% of these ads and inserts. In the coated groundwoods, the highest grade is pub blank, or publication blank. It gets its name because this is the paper stock that publishers use to print magazines on. This is similar in nature to soft white in that it is coated plain white paper, but it is a groundwood paper instead of a free sheet. To test this, use a groundwood pen. If it is taking a while to show color, you may want to tear the paper and use the pen on the torn fibers. This should be quicker and yield a more accurate result. Again, since pub blank is a groundwood, it should have a slightly more gray or cream color appearance to it. There should be no dyes or colorings on it. Next is coated sections. This grade is a printed, coated groundwood paper consisting of trim and full sheet with printings and inks present. Often, you will see large sheets with multiple pages before they have been cut to insert into a magazine for ads. We will also see a lot of trimmings of coated sections as well. This grade can't contain any glues. Magazines are the next grade in the coated groundwood papers. This is exactly what it sounds like. There are magazines and books, and is what you would end up with after cutting coated sections and binding them together. They will have a shiny or glossy pages, lots of dyes and colorings, and may contain postcards or other ads which are made of uncoated material. These will contain some glue bindings. Again, the lowest grade in every category is mixed paper. All mixed paper has the same price and is the lowest grade. The next slide will discuss a couple of other things that you may come across. SBS is short for solid bleached sulfate and is a virgin grade of paperboard. This will have a coating on it, and since it has been highly bleached and treated, it can resemble soft white. We currently have 1 or 2 customers who mix this in with their soft white, so we have to be careful in grading. If we get a lot of this in, we may be able to sell this in full truckload quantities as SBS because it is a higher grade than typical groundwood grades. IGS, or insoluble glued shavings, are generated from bookbinding operations that produce high-grade trim from soft-covered book production. These can be from coated or uncoated papers. Typically, when a book or magazine is bound with glue, they trim or shave off the edges to make a perfect edge to the pages of the book. These shavings containing the insoluble glues are considered IGS. Due to the insoluble glues, we grade and put it in with OP. However, if there is a Gaylord of the bindings only, meaning all the glue side, we are grading them in as non-recyclable materials. TMP, or thermomolecular pulp, looks a lot like soft white, but the difference is that it has groundwood. It is like there is a soft white paper glued to a white chipboard material. If you tear it, you can see the chipboard fibers. Using a groundwood pen would tend to show that this is a groundwood material, especially when used on the torn fibers. We will grade this as TMP on the breakdown sheet. For processing in the plant, we generally put this in with OCC, but check with your supervisor for any exceptions before doing so. Polycoated paper, which we discussed earlier, is a P-mix type of paper with a thin plastic coating on it. It will look very glossy, and when torn, you will see the layer of plastic on top. We have several clients who send us this paper in the form of book covers. When we receive a lot of this material, we grade it in as polycoated and will keep it separate. Too much of this in the P-mix is considered a contaminant. That is the end of the training. And we have an exam that we will do. Thank you.